Hey, you found us.
Welcome, everybody.
This is Scripture Gems. Hello, and welcome to the show. My name is Jon Fullmer, and this is my brother Jay.
How's it going, John?
We are two brothers who just can't get enough of the Scriptures.
We love them so much.
We do. This episode, we are going over the Come Follow Me lesson for June 22nd through 28th, 2020. This is covering Alma, chapter 17 through 22. And now, let's bring out the star of the show, the Scriptures.
Oh, this is so wonderful. I can't wait to read you.
Any lesson that we need the Scriptures, this is a great one.
Yeah.
So now, let's consult the Scripturematic 6000 to find out how long it will take to read this week's reading. 55 minutes, 2 seconds.
Whoa.
Wow.
That's a big one.
That's a big one.
See, now I look at that and I say that that's twice as much as, say, a previous week's reading. And then you say...
But if you break it up to a daily assignment, it's only 7 minutes and 52 seconds.
Yeah, that's nothing.
So,
that's a YouTube video.
That is.
Yeah.
That is. Your average YouTube video. It's just a little under 8 minutes. You can do that, but you have to do it every day. And boy, it'll be easy with these chapters. It's an exciting story.
Oh, my goodness.
We're back to narratives now.
Yeah. All right. And just a note, because we know this is going to be a longer episode, here are our time codes. And remember, the time codes are linked in the description below the video. If you don't know where those are, if you're on a mobile device, hit the down triangle and it will open that up. You can click on those and go directly to individual chapters.
Good deal. And now, in the 1985 words of Huey Lewis, we got to get back in time. We're doing a little flashback. Again.
Yeah. Now, we've got it laid out here, though. You can see that the chapters that we talked about that brought us up through chapter 16, that was happening in the north. Now we're going to be jumping back in just a minute to starting in chapter 17, verse 6, to what has been going on in the meanwhile. So everything we're going to be talking about up through chapter 27 is something that has been happening while we've been studying what's been happening in chapter 16. And we'll help you to make some connections between those two events, the ones in the north and the ones in the south.
So let's start with chapter 17. Now, where we left off last lesson, we had finished the whole saga of Ammonihah and their rejection of the word of God, their eventual destruction by the Lamanites, Alma and Amulek preaching the word throughout the land, and now they're headed southward, and this is where this chapter picks up. Now, before the chapter, we have a little statement that says, an account of the sons of Mosiah who rejected their rights to the kingdom for the word of God and went up to the land of Nephi to preach to the Lamanites their sufferings and deliverance according to the record of Alma. This is from the plates. So the plates themselves have kind of distinguished this as, okay, now we're talking about something else. And the very nature of that is a flashback. We're talking about the sons of Mosiah's story as they left. So let's jump into it. Verse 1. And now it came to pass that as Alma was journeying from the land of Gideon southward, away to the land of Manti, behold, to his astonishment, he met with the sons of Mosiah, journeying toward the land of Zarahemla. Now these sons of Mosiah were with Alma at the time the angel first appeared unto him. Therefore Alma did rejoice exceedingly to see his brethren. And what added more to his joy? They were still his brethren in the Lord. Yea, and they had waxed strong in the knowledge of the truth, for they were men of a sound understanding, and they had searched the Scriptures diligently, that they might know the word of God. But this is not all. They had given themselves to much prayer and fasting. Therefore they had the spirit of prophecy and the spirit of revelation, and when they taught with power and authority of God. And they had been teaching the word of God for the space of 14 years among the Lamanites, having had much success in bringing many to the knowledge of the truth. Yea, by the power of their words, many were brought before the altar of God to call on his name and confess their sins before him. So now we have the convergence of the two stories. We haven't gone back in time quite yet, but we recognize that at the end of Mosiah, the sons of Mosiah had left to go to the land of Nephi to teach the Lamanites, and we hadn't heard anything from them for a while. We've been following Alma's story, but now the two stories merged.
Mm-hmm.
And so the sons of Mosiah, the next few verses, it tells us that the sons of Mosiah and those they had chosen, so it's more than just those 4 people, there's more that have gone with them, left for Nephi. They brought weapons with them, like swords and spears, bows and arrows and slings, but they distinguished that they brought those weapons with them to hunt for food. It wasn't that they were attempting to defend themselves.
Yeah, which is so cool. I mean, we mentioned this last time, but in Alma 26, when Ammon is reflecting back on their opinion, their fellow brethren were like, no, go down there and destroy them. Well, we're bringing weapons, but they will be used to hunt for food so that they can teach the gospel. I love that.
Yep. It mentions that they left in the first year of the reign of the judges, and at the end of Alma chapter 16, from our last lesson, we had finished the 14th year of the reign of the judges. So just as those first few verses described, they had obviously been gone for 14 years. Very long mission.
Yeah.
And one of the other significant things that I was thinking about as we were talking about this is Mosiah II, their father, had passed away when they were gone. We learned from the end of Mosiah that Mosiah II died when he was 63 years old, which is kind of young. And perhaps it was unexpected. Perhaps the sons of Mosiah expected that their father would be alive when they returned. After all, Alma died when he was 82.
Yeah, well, regardless, I have a feeling that they wouldn't have come back anyway. I think they considered their mission to honor exactly what their father stood for.
Well, and that seems to be a common tale even in our modern age.
Yeah.
So, moving on. Verse 9.
So notice in verse 9 that even though they didn't use weapons to arm themselves, look at how they did arm themselves for the particular battle that they would be undertaking. In verse 9 it says they fasted much and prayed much, so that the result they were looking for is that the Lord would grant unto them a portion of his Spirit to go with them and abide with them, and that they might be an instrument in the hands of God in bringing, if it were possible, any of their brethren. And I love how they refer to the enemy of their people as their brethren. This is a wonderful perspective. This isn't a group identity perspective. This is we are children of God, and therefore you are my brothers and sisters, regardless of what your culture is or political position or ideology or whatever your traditions are. What a wonderful way to see one another. And so this is how they armed themselves in preparation to go into the battle.
And what was the result of their preparation? In verse 10, and it came to pass that the Lord did visit them with his Spirit, and said unto them, Be comforted. And they were comforted. And the Lord said unto them also, Go forth among the Lamanites, thy brethren, and establish my word. Yet ye shall be patient in long-suffering and afflictions, that ye may show forth good examples unto them in me, and I will make an instrument of thee in my hands, unto the salvation of many souls.
And look at what the result of that was. You know, here the Lord gives them a commandment, both in 10 and he says, be comforted. Feels like a commandment. And then he tells them what to do. The result in verse 12 is they took courage. Now, were they lacking courage? We don't see it right here necessarily, but if you look ahead to Alma 26, and the reason we're looking ahead is that in Alma 26, the sons of Mosiah are reflecting back on their missionary experience. And one of the things that we learn is how they were feeling at this time. It says in Alma 26:26, but behold, my beloved brethren, we came into the wilderness. Now they're not in the Lamanite lands yet. Into the wilderness, not with the intent to destroy our brethren, but with the intent that perhaps we might save some few of their souls, which I think is already amazing that they'd be happy with just anybody. Remember, there's been no success up till now. Now, when our hearts were depressed and we were about to turn back, that's the state they were in when 10 and 11 happens, if we go back to the chapter we were just in. And it recounts that in 27. But they were depressed and about to turn back. They haven't even gotten to the Lamanite lands. I'm not sure what sufferings caused them to turn around and be depressed. But it was during that time that they turned to the Lord, that they called upon him and fasted and prayed much, and this was the result. They took courage and went forward. So here's my thought for us to reflect on. Why is it easier to have courage when we know that we're doing what the Lord wants us to do, rather than serving on our own? Sometimes maybe we take on a calling or a responsibility and we just do it ourselves. And yet, if the Lord called us to it, aren't we entitled to his help? Aren't we entitled to his power that we could take courage? Have you ever been called to a calling you felt overwhelmed for or overwhelmed about, and you turned to the Lord and he gave you the strength because you recognized you were serving him? Not about all the particulars that we're going to go on and how your life would need to change and that kind of stuff. So I just think that's a really important element. If you know the Lord is calling you, then it's much easier to take courage than if you try to do it on your own.
You know, it was late in life, admittedly, that I realized the great miracle of the church. Think about all of the callings that you've had, and then ask yourself, did I receive any kind of formal training before I was called to this position? And the answer to that for most of us would be no. We received nothing. We were called to the position, we jumped in, we did the best we could. And while that seems insane from a worldly, pragmatic perspective, I think it's the most beautiful part of the gospel in serving in the church. It's one of the things that it forces us to do is to depend on our Heavenly Father. Look, Heavenly Father, I haven't done this calling before. I don't know how to do any of this. I need your help.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing.
It is, and if I offer one more thought along those lines, and that is, we think we have to do something big or great, and all God is asking us to do is to give what we have.
Yep.
It reminds us of the story of the feeding of the 5,000. In John's account, he tells us where they got the bread and the fishes. It was from a little lad. This little lad happened to have 5 barley loaves. Well, okay, he had 5 loaves, but they were barley loaves. No offense to those of you who love barley, but yuck. I mean, they were poor man's bread. And he had fishes, but they were 2 and they were small. So what he had to offer was not great by anybody's standard. But he gave all that he had, and what God did with it was amazing. That's what we need to do. We give him what we can offer, all that we have, and it may not be much. But we do it, we put it on the altar, and then the Lord can do miracles with it. And then we get back so much more than what we gave.
Agreed. And there's a great quote to that effect in the Come Follow Me manual. This is President Thomas S. Monson. This is a video called On the Lord's Errand, the life of Thomas S. Monson, and I encourage you to watch the video. It's on churchofjesuschrist.org. But there's a quote in it that says, quote, "I always want the Lord to know that if he needs an errand run, Tom Monson will run that errand for him." End quote.
I just love that attitude.
Great. Yep, it's a great one. And
attitude.
this is what embodies the Sons of Mosiah.
Yeah.
They are exceptional examples of people who did a complete 180 from going out to destroy the church to just giving everything to spread the gospel. Back in the verses that we just read, verse 11, there's a unique phrase that you may show forth good examples unto them in me. From the Institute Manual, there's a quote from Elder M. Russell Ballard. This is from General Conference, October 2001, where he talks about 3 important things that we can do to be better neighbors to those who are not of our faith. He says, quote, "First, get to know your neighbors. Learn about their families, their work, their views. Get together with them if they are willing. and do so without being pushy and without any ulterior motives. Friendship should never be offered as a means to an end. It can and should be an end unto itself. Let us cultivate meaningful relationships of mutual trust and understanding with people from different backgrounds and beliefs. Second, I believe it would be good if we eliminated a couple of phrases from our vocabulary: non-member and non-Mormon. Such phrases can be demeaning and even belittling. Personally, I don't consider myself to be a non-Catholic or a non-Jew. I am a Christian. I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That is how I prefer to be identified, for who and what I am, as opposed to being identified for what I am not. Let us extend that same courtesy to those who live among us. If a collective description is needed, then neighbors seems to work well in most cases. And third, if neighbors become testy or frustrated because of some disagreement with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or with some law we support for moral reasons, please don't suggest to them, even in a humorous way, that they consider moving someplace else. I cannot comprehend how any member of our church can even think of such a thing. Our pioneer ancestors were driven from place to place by uninformed and intolerant neighbors. They experienced extraordinary hardships and persecution because they thought, acted, and believed differently from others. If our history teaches us nothing else, it should teach us to respect the rights of all people, to peacefully coexist with one another. End quote.
Amen.
It's great advice.
Yeah, I hope that we can live up to it.
So let's move on here. In verse 18, Ammon being the chief among them, which I'm not sure what that means. We talked about whether or not Ammon was the oldest or Aaron was the oldest in a past lesson, and it's unclear. But he was evidently the chief among them, according to verse 18. He blessed them according to their several stations, having imparted the word of God unto them, or administered to them before his departure, and thus they took their several journeys throughout the land. So they split up, and each went to their own direction. Ammon went to the land of Ishmael, Ishmael being called after the sons of Ishmael, who became Lamanites. This is way back to the beginning of the Book of Mormon. And as Ammon entered into the land of Ishmael, the Lamanites took him and bound him. Now, I have to believe that Ammon would have expected this. The Lamanites don't like the Nephites. That is clear. So I wonder if he expected this.
Probably, and I think he must have felt maybe some level of safety in that plenty of Nephites had dissented to the Lamanites, and maybe, they'll give him a chance to say something before they dispatch him, which they did.
Yep. Verse 21, and thus Ammon was carried before the king who was over the land of Ishmael, and his name was Lamoni, and he was a descendant of Ishmael. And the king inquired of Ammon if it were his desire to dwell in the land among the Lamanites, or among his people. And Ammon said unto him, Yea, I desire to dwell among this people for a time, yea, and perhaps until the day I die. And it came to pass that King Lamoni was much pleased with Ammon, and caused that his bands should be loosed, and he would that Ammon should take one of his daughters to wife. But Ammon said unto him, Nay, but I will be thy servant. Therefore Ammon became a servant to King Lamoni, and it came to pass that he was set among other servants to watch the flocks of Lamoni according to the custom of the Lamanites. So a very interesting example of humility.
Yeah, he doesn't want to be in the royal family again. He was already. He was a prince. He turned that down. Marrying the daughter of the King Lamoni, even though he's a regent king, would have made him a prince again. He wants to be a shepherd. And that's exactly the opportunity that Lamoni gives him, which is so cool. I don't know what Lamoni's intentions were, but I can just imagine Ammon being like, shepherd is exactly what I wanted to be. So he's a servant of the king for 3 days. He and the other servants take the king's flocks to a place called Sebus. And Apparently everybody waters their flocks at this watering hole. And a group of Lamanites came and scattered the flocks, which is, I guess, tradition. And the servants became very afraid that the king would kill them. This is something that had been done in the past.
Right. In verse 28, and they began to weep exceedingly, saying, Behold, our flocks are scattered already.
Yeah. Were they waiting? Were they hoping that they could last till the afternoon until they were scattered? I just think that's such an interesting phrase. They're already scattered.
They took the job understanding that at some point their flocks would be lost. They just weren't expecting it this soon.
They were hoping for the first paycheck or something.
I don't know.
Now, look at what's happening going forward. Look for how Ammon is a type of Christ. Imagine the kind of parable vision that we get of things like the shepherd and the flock, and just watch for that.
Verse 29, Now they wept because of the fear of being slain. Now when Ammon saw this, his heart was swollen within him with joy.
Now, isn't that kind of a strange image, though? Their flocks are scattered. They're worried they're going to get killed. They're weeping. And Ammon's like, this is awesome. I love this. My heart is swollen with... What happens when our heart is swollen within us? What does it lead us to do? It leads us to action. And that's what he does.
For, said he, I will show forth my power unto these my fellow servants, or the power which is in me, in restoring these flocks unto the king, that I may win the hearts of these my fellow servants, that I may lead them to believe in my words.
Yeah. Are we this excited about opportunities to serve? To win hearts?
Well, it kind of makes you wonder whether Ammon had done any kind of shepherding before he left. He seems to be very confident about being able to gather this flock.
Oh, you mean literally shepherding?
Yes.
Yeah.
We know, of course, that Mosiah and his sons certainly would have assumed would have been laboring for their own support, to minimize taxes.
Yeah, that's true. That's
possible that he has some experience shepherding?
Yeah, I was curious, though, if he didn't, if maybe he, did other jobs, if part of his naivete.
Pretty confident.
Well, I know, but maybe that's the naivete of it. I just go gather the flocks. Meanwhile, the shepherd's like, that's impossible. Yet he didn't know. He didn't know not to ask.
Right.
And so all of a sudden they did it, and they're like, wow, this is amazing. I don't know, but it's interesting. Sometimes that happens with us. We don't know enough that we do something that others would have said, no, that's not possible.
Right. And now these were the thoughts of Ammon when he saw the afflictions of those who he termed to be his brethren. And it came to pass that he flattered them by his words, saying, My brethren, be of good cheer. Let us go in search of the flocks, and we will gather them together and bring them back unto the place of water. And thus we will preserve the flocks unto the king, and he will not slay us.
That's sound advice.
Yep.
Now, as we take a look in 32, watch for how they not only act on what Ammon said, but look how Ammon shepherds the sheep and teaches the servants to shepherd the sheep. These servants who he's teaching these Christ-centered shepherding techniques, they will become shepherds of men. Like Peter, he was given that example in fishing, something he knew how to do, and the Lord gave him that understanding that now he would be a fisher of men. Well, Ammon's teaching these servants to become shepherds of men, which they will coming up here in a few days. But for now, he's going to teach them to be shepherds and what that means.
Verse 32.
And it came to pass that they went in search of the flocks. There's step one. Go in search. And they did follow Ammon. Who's he? He's their spiritual leader. They followed him. They followed his example. They rushed forth with much swiftness. There's no time to lose. Get out there and let the Lord work through you. And did head the flocks of the king. Now, that's an interesting phrase. The idea of heading the flocks of the king means to turn them in another direction, stop them from going in the destructive direction that they are going. And did gather them together again. We need to be together. This is not a church of doing things on your own. We need to be together to the place of water. Who's our living water? of course it's Jesus Christ, to a place of water. And then those men stood again to scatter the flocks. But Ammon said to his brethren, encircle the flocks. A good spiritual shepherd encircles the flocks round about so that they won't flee at a sign of danger. They won't flee when they're being persecuted, when they're frightened. And then he will go and contend. And we'll let Ammon go and contend with his brethren. Mm-hmm. And how did that work out?
Very interesting. Verse 35, this is the reaction of the men who came to scatter the flocks. They did not fear Ammon, for they supposed that one of their men could slay him according to their pleasure. For they knew not that the Lord had promised Mosiah that he would deliver his sons out of their hands. Neither did they know anything concerning the Lord. Therefore they delighted in the destruction of their brethren.
Now notice that. The result of them not knowing anything about the Lord was they delighted in destruction of their brethren.
Yeah, it was more about them being able to manifest their own power. It was about their own...
Well, that's
they
what
were looking
happens.
out for themselves. Yeah.
If God is not a part of the equation, then it's about the natural man.
Verse 36, but Ammon stood forth and began to cast stones at them with his sling. Yea, with mighty power he did sling stones amongst them, and thus he slew a certain number of them, insomuch that they began to be astonished at his power. Nevertheless, they were angry because of the slain of their brethren, and they were determined that he should fall. Therefore, seeing that they could not hit him with their stones, they came forth with clubs to slay him. But behold, every man that lifted his club to smite Ammon, he smote off their arms with his sword. For he did withstand their blows by smiting their arms with the edge of his sword, insomuch that they began to be astonished, and began to flee before them. Yea, and they were not few in number, and he caused them to flee by the strength of his arm.
What a powerful phrase, by the strength of his arm. This moment, it's important to remember, we can look to Ammon and his skill and his power and his prowess. But John, by the way, made a really great connection, and I want to make sure that we shared it. I wrote it in my scriptures many years ago, and I'm excited to share it with you here. He connected this to Doctrine and Covenants 35, 13, and 14. When we look at that phrase, he caused them to flee by the strength of his arm. The Doctrine and Covenants, the Lord says this, wherefore I call upon the weak things of the world, those who are unlearned and despised, to thresh the nations by the power of my spirit. And their arm shall be my arm, and I will be their shield and their buckler, and I will gird up their loins, and they shall fight manfully for me. And their enemies shall be under their feet, and I will let fall the sword in their behalf. And by the fire of mine indignation will I preserve them. This, I think, captures us maybe even better than it does Ammon. But when we are in the Lord's service, we are entitled to his power. And as it's described in these verses, it's ultimately his arm that is being used in his service.
Verse 38, now 6 of them had fallen by the sling, but he slew none, save it were their leader, with his sword. And he smote off as many of their arms as were lifted against him, and they were not a few. And when he had driven them afar off, he returned, and they watered their flocks, and returned them to the pasture of the king. And then went in unto the king, bearing the arms which had been smitten off by the sword of Ammon, of those who sought to slay him. And they were carried in unto the king for a testimony of the things which they had done. So that brings us to chapter 18. And the king commands his servants, except Ammon, who is not there, that they should testify of the events, and they tell him what happened, and showed them the arms, evidently. And Lamoni responds in verse 2, surely this is more than a man. Behold, is not this the great Spirit who doth send such great punishments upon this people because of their murders? Now, what's interesting about this to me is that they feel free to murder each other, or, it seems clear that there was a history of Lamoni slaughtering his servants because the flocks were scattered. But this is an insight to the notion of the light of Christ that everyone has. Somewhere in Lamoni's psyche, he knows that killing someone else is wrong, and he's feeling guilty about it.
Well, and that notion, the fact that he's feeling it is pretty remarkable, considering that it's outside of what he's been taught. As we see going on in verse 3, the servants respond, "Whether he be the great spirit or a man, we know not. But this much we do know, that he cannot be slain by the enemies of the king. Neither can they scatter the king's flocks when he is with us, because of his expertness and great strength. Therefore we know that he is a friend to the king. And now, O king, we do not believe that a man has such great power, for we know he cannot be slain." Now notice that this is the first missionary work by the servants, these shepherds. They have testified of Ammon to the king.
And it's interesting. Mormon kind of brushes over this in the story, but it seems clear that Ammon was protected. He could not be slain. And it must have been miraculous enough that the servants recognized, look, this guy can't be killed. There were a huge group of people that were throwing stones at him and attacking him with clubs, and he just can't be killed.
It's very Samuel the Lamanite.
Yeah, it is kind of.
But they didn't know what to attribute it to.
Right. They hadn't seen that kind of power before.
Yeah. So, and now when the king heard these words, he said unto them, "Now I know that it is the Great Spirit, and he has come down at this time to preserve your lives, that I might not slay you as I did your brethren." Now notice this, in verse 5 it tells us what his religious upbringing was. Now this was the tradition of Lamoni, which he had received from his father, that there was a great spirit. Notwithstanding they believed in a great spirit, they supposed that whatsoever thing they did was right. What an upbringing. There is a God, but he doesn't have any expectations of you. Whatever you do is the right thing, which is one reason why Lamoni may not have batted an eye at his behavior toward his other servants. But notice this, nevertheless, Lamoni began to fear exceedingly with fear, lest he had done wrong in slaying his servants. Why? There was no gospel that was taught. He might be saying, you know what, Ammon taught me this about, Christ, and I should repent. Ammon hasn't preached a single word to him, at least not verbally, not using words, and yet his righteous example has had such a powerful impact on him that he's already beginning to feel a change of heart. Don't underestimate how powerful an example can be.
Absolutely. And here again, to me, this is a real example of his own light of Christ coming through. And it suggests to me that Lamoni has always had some misgivings about murdering people, that there's always been something in the back of his mind that has said, this is wrong, we shouldn't do this. But it's coming to surface now. In verse 8, "And it came to pass that King Lamoni inquired of his servants, saying, Where is this man that has such great power? And they said unto him, Behold, he is feeding thy horses. Now the king had commanded his servants previous to the time of the watering of their flocks, that they should prepare his horses and chariots, and conduct him forth to the land of Nephi, for there had been a great feast appointed at the land of Nephi by the father of Lamoni, who was king over all the land. Now when King Lamoni had heard that Ammon was preparing his horses and his chariots, he was more astonished, because of the faithfulness of Ammon, saying, Surely there has not been any servant among all my servants that has been so faithful as this man. For even he doth remember all my commandments to execute them. Now I surely know that this is the Great Spirit, and I would desire him that he come in unto me, but I durst not." Now, I don't know what this says about his other servants.
Normally I have to tell my servants over and over and over again. This guy actually does it.
I'm not used to people actually following my instructions. I don't know what to do now. Well, I mean, if the servants perhaps have been brought up with the same ideology as King Lamoni, you know, they believe in a great spirit, but they believe anything that they do, you know, talk to the union. I don't know.
Right.
And who knows? There is a quote that I pulled out of the Institute manual about the importance of temporal service. This is President Henry B. Eyring from an Ensign article in February 2004 called "The Book of Mormon Will Change Your Life." He says, quote, "When the other servants brought the evidence of what Ammon had done, King Lamoni said, 'Where is he?' They said, 'Oh, he is in the stables. He is doing every little thing to serve you.' Isn't that odd? He was called to teach the doctrines of salvation, but he was in the stables. Don't you think he should have been praying and fasting and polishing his teaching plan? No, he was in the stables. King Lamoni had been brought up with a belief that there was a God, but that whatever the king did was right. He had been specifically taught false doctrine that might have made him impervious to feelings of guilt. Do you remember that when he heard where Ammon was, a feeling of guilt, of fear that he had done wrong in the killing of his servants came over him? I have always focused before on how mixed up Lamoni was in his doctrine without seeing the miracle. The miracle was that a spiritual need was created in a man that he might be taught the gospel of Jesus Christ. His heart was broken. He felt guilt, and it came from the temporal things that Ammon had done. Never underestimate the spiritual value of doing temporal things well for those whom you serve. Be their servants, and you will love them, and they will feel your love, and more important, they will feel God's love." End quote.
Wonderful.
So Ammon comes in to the king. He has made ready the horses and chariots. Verse 12, he saw that the countenance of the king was changed. Therefore he was about to return out of his presence. And one of the king's servants said unto him, "Rabbana, the king desireth thee to stay." Now, quick aside here. The king was too stunned to speak, but the king's servants had obviously been impacted enough that they realized that the king really wanted to talk to him, but just couldn't say anything.
Well, it calls him great king.
Yes, Rabbana. First of all, Rabbana should, for any Hebrew scholar, should seem interesting, because that's a very Hebrewish word. It's very related to rabbi and Rabboni, Rabbana.
Yeah. So, great king, our king desires you to stay.
And Ammon says, "What wilt thou that I should do for thee, O king?" And the king answered him not for the space of an hour, according to their time. So I don't know what that means. I don't know
either.
If an hour was shorter according to their time than to ours, or longer. Who knows?
The one thing I would take away from Mormon's insert, according to their time, is that maybe I don't take that literally, that it was an hour.
Yeah. I think it seems clear that it was a long period of time. How long, don't know.
Right.
For he knew not what he should say unto him. This is Lamoni. He didn't know what to say. And Ammon said unto him again, "What desirest thou of me?" But the king answered him not. And it came to pass that Ammon, being filled with the Spirit of God, therefore he perceived the thoughts of the king.
Now, we've seen this before with Alma in the north and Amulek. When they were preaching against the lawyers, the Spirit helped them to perceive their thoughts. So we're seeing this happening again here for Ammon.
Yeah. And he said unto him, "Is it because thou hast heard that I defended thy servants and thy flocks, and slew 7 of their brethren with the sling and with the sword, and smote off the arms of the others in order to defend thy flocks and thy servants? Behold, is it this that causeth thy marvelings? Now, what's interesting about this is that this is actually an additional witness. Now, not only has the king seen the arms, not only has he heard the testimony of the servants, but just in case the servants made the whole thing up to protect their own lives, this is the testimony from Ammon himself. Verse 17, I say unto you, what is it that thy marvelings are so great? Behold, I am a man, and am thy servant. Therefore, whatsoever thou desirest which is right, that will I do. Again, establishing his relationship with the king. Hey, I'm your servant. You asked me to do these things. I did them. Why is that surprising to you? Again, doesn't speak well for his former servants. I don't know.
No, it doesn't. But whatever this is, in verse 18, the king marvels again because of this discerning of thoughts. And then we enter into this conversation between the two of them.
Who art thou? Art thou that great spirit who knows all things?
I am not.
How knowest the thoughts of my heart? Thou mayest speak boldly and tell me concerning these things, and also tell me by what power ye slew and smote off the arms of my brethren that scattered my flocks. And now if thou wilt tell me concerning these things, whatsoever thou desirest I will give unto thee, and if it were needed I would guard thee with my armies. But I know that thou art more powerful than all they. Nevertheless, whatsoever thou desirest of me, I will grant it unto thee.
Wilt thou hearken unto my words, if I tell thee by what power I do these things? And this is the thing that I desire of thee.
Yea, I will believe all thy words.
Believest thou that there is a God?
I do not know what that meaneth.
Believest thou that there is a great spirit?
Yea.
This is God. Believest thou that this great spirit, who is God, created all things which are in heaven and in the earth?
Yea, I believe he created all things which are in the earth, but I do not know the heavens.
The heavens is a place where God dwells and all his holy angels.
Is it above the earth?
Yea, and he looketh down upon all the children of men, and he knows all the thoughts and intents of the heart, for by his hand were they all created from the beginning.
I believe all these things which thou hast spoken. Art thou sent from God?
I am a man. And man in the beginning was created after the image of God. And I am called by his Holy Spirit to teach these things unto this people, that they may be brought to a knowledge of that which is just and true. And a portion of that Spirit dwelleth in me, which giveth me knowledge, and also power, according to my faith and desires which are in God. Now, there's an interesting phrase that he says right off the bat when he asks him if he is the great spirit who knows all things. In verse 19, he says, I am not. And one thing I love about that phrase, and I hope I'm not reading too much into it, but Jesus Christ refers to himself as the I am. And so when Ammon is being asked if he is divine, he's essentially saying, Christ, I am not. The I am not. And I love that. There's kind of a duality in the way he pulls himself away from any kind of sense of being more than just a man, a brother to Lamoni.
Right. Again, establishing the concept of we are all children of God.
Yeah.
And so everyone is a brother or sister to us. It's a good insight. We talked before about the notion that Jehovah is typically literally translated as I am, or I am, I was, I am to be. So that's an interesting thought. Also in verse 33, it's interesting that King Lamoni almost seems to be receiving spiritual promptings of what to ask next. Art thou sent from God? He gets it. He understands what's going on. It's exciting. really.
It is, and it seems to have everything to do with the fact that King Lamoni desires so much to understand what this is. And that plays a big part, even for us as members of the restored gospel. Where is our desire to really understand the Lord's purposes?
Good point. So in the next few verses, Ammon talks about the history of all people, starting with Adam and Eve, and continuing to Lehi and his departure, including the rebellions of Laman and Lemuel and the sons of Ishmael, which is, kind of bold, seeing as we know that Lamoni is a descendant of Ishmael, right?
Yeah, and if you're going to teach someone that their traditions are wrong, best to start with a big perspective, the eternal perspective. I think that's the main way it's going to make any kind of sense and not just be overtly offensive.
Offensive, exactly. Verse 39, he teaches the plan of salvation, including the coming of Christ. From the Institute Manual, there is a quote in response to the concept of speaking boldly. So King Lamoni gave Ammon the opportunity to speak boldly about his explanation. And Elder M. Russell Ballard gave some really good counsel about starting gospel conversations with our friends. And this is from April 2006 General Conference. He says, quote, "Creating a gospel-sharing home does not mean that we are going to have to dedicate large amounts of time to meeting and cultivating friends with whom to share the gospel. These friends will come naturally into our lives, and if we are open about our membership in the church from the very beginning, we can easily bring gospel discussions into the relationship with very little risk of being misunderstood. Friends and acquaintances will accept that this is part of who we are, and they will feel free to ask questions." A sister in France was asked about the secret of her success. She said, "I simply share my joy. I treat everyone as if they were already a member of the church. If I'm standing by someone in line and strike up a conversation, I share with them how much I enjoyed my church meetings on Sunday. When coworkers ask, 'What did you do this weekend?' I do not skip from Saturday night to Monday morning. I share with them that I went to church, what was said, and my experiences with the saints. I talk about how I live, think, and feel." End quote. There's another quote from the Institute Manual. This one, I actually have a string of quotes, but this one is from Elder Lawrence C. Dunn of 70 at the time. And this is about the importance of building on common ground or common belief. This is something that Ammon, of course, did very clearly, because while Lamoni didn't understand the concept of a God, of a single God, he did understand the Great Spirit, which was a teaching similar enough so that he could build on that. Quote, "Today we live in times of conflict, dissent, differences of opinion, charges, countercharges, disagreements. There is a need for us, perhaps more than ever before, to reach within ourselves and allow the quality of mutual respect, mingled with charity and forgiveness, to influence our actions with one another, to be able to disagree without becoming disagreeable, to lower our voices and build on common ground with the realization that once the storm has passed, we still have to live with one another." End quote. That's from April 1991 General Conference, by the way. And so the concept of living in times of conflict, dissent, differences of opinion, that's gotten 29 years worse.
You know what's really great, though? And I honestly, I just noticed it this time. Ammon understood how to relate to Lamoni's beliefs because he listened to his beliefs. I don't know how much Ammon knew about Lamanite religious beliefs before his mission. Maybe he knew it already. But in the story that we just read, first he asks Ammon if he's the Great Spirit who knows all things. And then when he finally asked the question, "Do you believe in God?" he said, "I don't know what that means." He went back to his beliefs that he had listened to previously. So if we're going to teach people, maybe we need to do a better job of understanding what their beliefs are in a really sincere way, not in a, isn't this funny sort of way, but really
Or
try to understand.
argumentative way, yeah.
Argumentative or even persecutive. The people that pursue an anti-Mormon perspective are reading books that describe the church through the lens of wanting to persecute it. And if we learn about other people's faiths that way, then we won't be able to have these kinds of conversations.
Well, think about how you might feel towards someone who is presenting anti-Mormon arguments. Do you respect them? Do you respect that they have made any attempt to understand what you believe?
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Yeah, and Ammon did that perfectly. He really understood. And I think the king felt that he did. And so he was really willing to listen because Ammon was talking to him on his terms. It was beautiful. It's really cool.
There's another quote that I pulled out of the Institute manual that I wanted to include, and this is a very famous one from President Gordon B. Hinckley in October 2002 General Conference, in that attitude of understanding another person's beliefs. He says, quote, "We say in a spirit of love, bring with you all that you have of good and truth, which you have received from whatever source, and come, and let us see if we may add to it. This invitation I extend to men and women everywhere." End quote.
Yeah.
I love that.
That needs to be our attitude.
Absolutely.
It also testifies that there's lots of truth out there, and we embrace all of it. What we have is not we don't corner the market on truth. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints makes no professions to being the only place and the only source for truth. What we profess is to have the fullness of the gospel, which is why the vast majority of people that convert to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are those from other Christian traditions who recognize that they do have a relationship with Christ. They are Christians, of course they are. But now they want more, a fullness of that Christianity. And that's what they look for, and that's what the gospel offers to all of us.
It's true, and as much as has been revealed, every member of this church must recognize there's still more to come.
Oh, yes.
There's a lot that we still don't know, and we're looking forward to it. We believe that God will reveal many great and important things pertaining to the kingdom of God.
Hey, I got to write that down.
Sounds like should be an important thing to remember, an article of faith, perhaps.
Oh, I thought it was just a primary song.
It could be both, actually.
I think it is.
So when Ammon teaches King Lamoni, we mentioned that he starts with Adam and Eve and the creation. But why? Why does that seem to be the central point? We're going to see that again here later with Aaron. To start at the very beginning, a very good place to start, as we're told. Another quote that I found in the Institute manual from then Elder Russell M. Nelson. This is from General Conference, April 2000. Quote, "The plan required the creation, and that in turn required both the fall and the atonement. These are the three fundamental components of the plan. The creation of a paradisiacal planet came from God. Mortality and death came into the world through the fall of Adam. Immortality and the possibility of eternal life were provided by the atonement of Jesus Christ. The creation, the fall, and the atonement were planned long before the actual work of the creation began." End quote. So why Adam and Eve? That's part of the plan. Ammon is teaching the foundational elements of the plan of salvation.
Yep. So what happens?
Yeah, let's go on. Verse 40. "And it came to pass that after he had said all these things and expounded them to the king, that the king believed all his words. And he began to cry unto the Lord, saying, O Lord, have mercy according to thy abundant mercy which thou hast had upon the people of Nephi. Have upon me and my people." And now, when he had said this, he fell unto the earth, as if he were dead. And it came to pass that his servants took him and carried him in unto his wife. and laid him upon a bed. And he lay as if he were dead for the space of 2 days and 2 nights. And his wife and his sons and his daughters mourned over him, after the manner of the Lamanites, greatly lamenting his loss. Now, I think to the average person, this might have been shocking, even from Ammon's perspective, but Ammon's seen this before.
He has.
Let's go back to the end of Mosiah. You remember when his friend Alma, visited by an angel and then fallen as if he were dead?
Yeah.
He knows what's going to happen.
Yep. Yeah, or at least he's certainly seen this before. Coming up in this next chapter is one of the great love stories, in my opinion, of Scripture. I think the relationship between Lamoni and his wife is just fantastic. And I don't always imagine that, throughout history, arranged marriages were the most common. And so my assumption is this was an arranged marriage. And yet they love each other so much, and there's so much of tenderness and intimacy in these coming verses. Watch for it as we examine this next story. But we should start with this last verse. Look, his wife and his kids are mourning over him, greatly lamenting his loss. He's loved by his family. So in the next chapter, we're introduced now to his wife. She takes on a starring role. And after 2 days and 2 nights of this, I don't know what Ammon is doing during this time. And, if Ammon was a different sort of person, he might stroll in and go, I got this covered, everybody. Just watch me. I'll show you. He doesn't put himself in the starring role. He goes back, I assume, to being the servant, so much so that in order for him to participate in what's happening here, in verse 2, she has to send for him. And she does. He doesn't insert himself.
I was going to suggest that he probably went back to the stables. There's probably
he may
more
have
work to be done.
But notice that she sent for him because she desired something from him. And that desire, as we're taught time and time again, is the beginning of conversion. And she doesn't even know at this point maybe what to be converted to, but she knows there's something about Ammon. She's been told this by her servants. So she sends for him, and he comes, and I'm sure gladly so. She testifies what her servants have testified about him. Again, missionary work from the servants. Awesome. And recognizes that he's a servant of a holy God. In verse 5, she wants him to go in and it doesn't say go in and heal my husband even. It says go in and just see him. Will you just go in and see him? He's been laid on his bed for 2 days and 2 nights. Some say he is not dead. But there's a conflict because there's others who say that he is dead, that he stinketh, and that he ought to be placed in the sepulchre. And then we get the phrase that always gets a chuckle from everybody. But as for myself, to me he doth not stink. And can we spend just a moment on this? We use it lightly, I have as well, but that's not the intent. Mormon didn't add this into the story for us to find it humorous. And if not humorous, then what are we supposed to understand from it? My undergraduate degree is in neurobiology, and I have a passion for a lot of things related to biology. One thing that many people don't know is that women have a superior sense of smell to men. Why is that important? And I apologize that we're going to get just sciencey for just a moment. So let me put on my sciencey hat. The research on this it's so prolific, it's easy to find. One possible reason why women have a superior sense of smell is that they have 50 times more neurons in their olfactory system than men do. It's better developed. And there's good reasons why it could be. But the point that I want to bring out here is that smell is one of the most profound senses for memory. Unlike other senses that, you have a receptor and then it goes down neurons to the brain. Don't shut off here, people. I'm just going to cover this quickly. That's not true for olfactory. The olfactory receptors are here at the top of the nasal cavity, and they plug directly into the olfactory center. Have you ever had the experience of smelling something and memories come flooding back? If you haven't, you will. It's incredibly powerful. from memory. One of the things that women have, one of the tests that they do for smell, is blindfolding them and marching babies under their nose. And in some tests, women 100% of the time can choose their baby by smell alone. There's many women that I know anecdotally, but this is also in the literature, that when a husband passes away or when he's gone for a period of time, they'll sleep on his pillow because his scent is on the pillow. They'll wear his shirt because his scent is on the shirt. Smell is very important. We don't talk about it in our culture. As a matter of fact, you may feel weird with us talking about it now. But smell's incredibly important to us as human beings, and even more so to women. So for her, I imagine her in this Walter Rain image here. This is a Walter Rain painting of her laying on her husband, being with her husband. She knows her husband's smell, and she knows that he's not dead. This is a very intimate detail. That's something that, again, we wouldn't talk about today. And yet, it's really powerful. So she says, to me, he doth not stink. In other words, I know the smell of my husband, and he's not dead. And Ammon understands that she's absolutely right. He goes in, he sees him, he explains to her what's going on, that he's being, in a sense, born again, and asks if she believes. And of course, she testifies that with no other witness, and maybe even surprises herself, that she believes that it will be according as he has said. Ammon is overwhelmed in verse 10. Blessed art thou because of thy exceeding faith. I say unto thee, woman, there has not been such great faith among all the people of the Nephites. That's a huge compliment.
Wow.
I don't know if it's hyperbole, because of course his dad, and Alma and others, but what he sees in her is remarkable. Now, this next part is the other really great romantic moment for me, intimate moment. It came to pass that she watched over the bed of her husband from that time. Why? Isn't she the queen? Couldn't she assign that to somebody? But she doesn't, because she's not a queen right now. She's a wife who is worried about her family, worried about her love. And so she stays with him from that time until the time on the morrow, which Ammon had appointed that he should rise. Now look at this moment. I did a painting of this moment because, again, it's the single most romantic moment for me in all of Scripture. Look at the detail that Mormon gives us, and thank you, Mormon, for including these tidbits. It came to pass, verse 12, that he arose, according to the words of Ammon. And as he arose, he stretched forth his hand unto the woman. Can you see that moment in your mind's eye? Can you see him reaching for his beloved wife? And at that moment he says, Blessed be the name of God, and blessed art thou. Now, why would he say this? We could understand why he would say, Blessed be the name of God. We know from Alma's experience, he's just had his hard heart softened and his old life taken away. He's reborn in God. And to have a vision of that or whatever, that makes complete sense. But why does he praise her in the same breath as he did with God? I would propose that the answer comes in the next verse. For as sure as thou livest, behold, I have seen my Redeemer, and he shall come forth and be born of a woman, and he shall redeem all mankind who believe on his name. Not only did he have a vision of the Redeemer and what that means in the plan of salvation, but of woman's place in the plan of salvation. Now, she's a mother of his children. He knows motherhood is great. But he's looking at her now, and that's what I hope to capture in this painting. He's looking at her now with new eyes. He's seeing her in a divine way, her role not just as his beloved wife, but as the divine role of women in the plan of salvation to bring about the redemption of all mankind. And that moment is so magical between the two of them that he is overwhelmed again, and so is she. And this time they jointly fall into whatever this is that they fall into when they fall to the earth. But I love that at this moment, they are together. Now, in the next few verses, Ammon is overwhelmed. The servants are overwhelmed. The Lord is pouring out his Spirit, and it's just incredible. And every one of them is falling into whatever this is, except one person.
It's one person. In verse 16, and it came to pass that they did call on the name of the Lord in their might, even until they had all fallen to the earth, save it were one of the Lamanitish women, whose name was Abish. She, having been converted unto the Lord for many years on account of a remarkable vision of her father, thus having been converted to the Lord, and never having made it known. Therefore, when she saw that all the servants of Lamoni had fallen to the earth, and also her mistress the queen, and the king, and Ammon lay prostrate upon the earth, she knew that it was the power of God. And supposing that this opportunity, by making known unto the people what had happened among them, that by beholding this scene it would cause them to believe in the power of God. Therefore she ran forth from house to house, making it known unto the people. Now what's interesting about this is that there are only 3 Book of Mormon character women that are actually named in the Book of Mormon, and Abish is one of them. She had been converted to the gospel due to a remarkable vision that her father had, and we don't know the name of her father or anything else about this vision, unfortunately. But she had been secretly converted to the Lord, but had kept it to herself. Now she saw it manifest, and it excited her, obviously. I wonder, though, going back to the story of Zeniff, is this part of the goodness that Zeniff saw in the Lamanites? Notice the willingness of the servants and the king and the queen to embrace the gospel.
Yeah, that may be. I love the fact that there's this whole, the Lord is working with these people, regardless of what the Nephites are doing. That's a great lesson for us too. The Lord's work is not just in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints or in other Christian denominations. His work extends to everybody. And we see that witnessed here in the Book of Mormon. I have just a quick note on names of women in the Book of Mormon, in the sense that some people wonder how come we only have a few women that are named, and we don't know the answer. But there is a great article in the Encyclopedia of Mormonism that you can link to. I'll put it in the description. Women in the Book of Mormon, written by Donna Bowen and Camilla Williams. And they do share some ideas as an overview to the Book of Mormon, but some ideas that are suggested. There are modern Middle Eastern cultures in which referring to a woman by her first name, when you're not related or intimately connected to her, is disrespectful. In fact, it's better and safer in an environment maybe in the ancient world where you didn't have police forces like we think of them today, that to say somebody like, or to say something like, instead of Sariah, to say Lehi's wife, is to say this woman is connected and protected with all of these resources that are embodied under Lehi. And maybe in Abish's situation as a servant who perhaps doesn't have a family, there wasn't another way to refer to her. I suppose they could have referred to her as the servant of somebody. But regardless, I'm sure that there are legitimate cultural reasons why certain people are named and others are not. But I don't think we know what they are. But this article might be interesting, an interesting read.
It is a good point that they name Abish, but they don't name the queen.
Yeah.
It's odd. Anyway, so Abish goes and gathers all kinds of people together. A crowd forms, okay? And in verse 18, to their astonishment, they beheld the king and the queen and their servants prostrate upon the earth, and they all lay there as though they were dead. And they also saw Ammon, and behold, he was a Nephite. And now the people began to murmur among themselves, some of them saying that it was a great evil that had come upon them, or upon the king and his house, because they had suffered that the Nephites should remain in the land. But others rebuked them, saying, the king hath brought this evil upon his house, because he slew his servants who had had their flocks scattered at the waters of Sebus. Now, it's interesting. There, again, is this notion of guilt for murder. There is this sense that they understand that murder is wrong, even though supposedly, according to their religion, it doesn't matter what they do.
And something else at the end of 18 where it says, behold, he was a Nephite. That may be an interesting thing as well. If you hold to the idea that Nephites and Lamanites look different ethnically, which I don't, but if you do, then that's an easy sell. But even if at this point there have been so many dissenters, we know we're going to find out that there's Amalicites and Amlicites and other Nephite groups that have joined the Lamanites. So what's the big deal? How would you distinguish? I think the only way they could distinguish that he was a Nephite is he didn't cut his hair like they cut their hair. He didn't put red on his forehead like they do. He didn't maybe have the jewelry that they did or the clothes that they had.
And see, that's an easy sell for me, is that how many people today do you distinguish merely because of how they dress? You know, he obviously dressed differently than they did, most likely.
Well, and my point in saying that is that he was serving among the Lamanites, but he didn't become a Lamanite. He still was doing the things and observing the things and dressing in whatever that marked him as, well, as a Christian, honestly. And so even though he served them, he could still serve them and not become one of them.
And if we go further into the controversy here, this is actually kind of funny because we had the rebuke of some people saying that the king brought this evil upon himself because he slew his servants that had had their flocks scattered at the waters of Sebus. And they were also rebuked by those men who had stood at the waters of Sebus and scattered the flocks which belonged to the king. For they were angry with Ammon because of the number which he had slain of their brethren at the waters of Sebus while defending the flocks of the king. No. It's to me, that's hilarious that the marauders,
the
people who were,
right.
say, hey, no, that's not the reason. Now, one of them whose brother had been slain with the sword of Ammon, so this is one of the criminals, being exceedingly angry with Ammon, drew his sword and went forth that he might let it fall upon Ammon to slay him. And as he lifted the sword to smite him, behold, he fell dead. Now we see that Ammon could not be slain, for the Lord had said unto Mosiah his father, I will spare him, and it shall be unto him according to thy faith. Therefore Mosiah trusted him unto the Lord.
So I guess the servants were right. Ammon could not be slain.
Indeed. And you know what's significant about this? It's possible that Mosiah had already passed away at this point.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, that's true. That could be. I mean, this is all happening
yet
remarkably
the promise
fast.
is still there.
Yeah.
The promise is still with him.
Yeah.
And so, anyway, there's all this back and forth. Verse 25, and it came to pass that there were many among them who said that Ammon was the Great Spirit, and others said he was sent by the Great Spirit.
Yeah, but others rebuked them all, saying that he was a monster. Now, I have to say, if you've ever watched the Living Scriptures cartoon version of this story, do you remember this?
Yes.
So,
he's a monster.
There's some guy in the background of the crowd. So the crowd's all rumbling. He's a great spirit. No, he's not the great spirit. And some guy pops, and his voice pops out above everybody else. No, he's a monster. Although, John, you did it better.
It's so hilarious.
So I can now not read that without always hearing that in my mind. If the voice artist who did that phrase is out there, please reach out.
We'd love to have you on the show to repeat the performance. We would.
Yeah, I just want you to know you made a difference in our lives. That's hilarious.
And there were some who said that Ammon was sent by the Great Spirit to afflict them because of their iniquities. Again, that sense of guilt. And that it was the Great Spirit that had always attended the Nephites, who had ever delivered them out of their hands. And they said that it was the Great Spirit who had destroyed so many of their brethren, the Lamanites. This is also interesting. There's this sense that, while the Great Spirit protects these guys, protects the Nephites, there's just this shell of an understanding of how
that's
the
really
gospel
interesting.
works.
Yeah.
And thus the contention began to be exceedingly sharp among them, so that when Abish finally comes and sees the contention,
Oh,
which was among the multitude, she was exceedingly sorrowful, even unto tears.
she's waited so long to share the gospel, it seems, and now the opportunity is there. She's like, oh, I could be a missionary. And she goes out there and she does her best. She goes from house to house and it's wonderful. And then it just all falls apart. Everybody's arguing. There's all this contention and she just starts crying. Your heart just breaks for her.
Yeah.
Hey, you know something else that you were just pointing out as I was thinking about it? This idea that if we understand this right, that their religious tradition teaches that there is a great spirit who doesn't care what they do, but he seems to like the Nephites. What a great message. Can you imagine why this message would be maybe so that they would love this message? Well received is to say, no, the great spirit loves you too. You are his child.
You can be favored by the great spirit as well.
And we can show you what he wants for you. And I mean, God, that's just so uplifting.
Yeah, agreed. So in verse 29, and it came to pass that she, this is Abish, went and took the queen by the hand, that perhaps she might raise her from the ground. And as soon as she touched her hand, she arose and stood upon her feet, and cried with a loud voice, saying, O blessed Jesus, who has saved me from an awful hell. O blessed God, have mercy on this people. And when she had said this, she clasped her hands, being filled with joy, speaking many words which were not understood. And when she had done this, she took the king, Lamoni, by the hand, and behold, he arose and stood upon his feet. And he immediately, seeing the contention among his people, went forth and began to rebuke them, and to teach them the words which he had heard from the mouth of Ammon. And as many as heard his words believed, and were converted unto the Lord. But there were many among them who would not hear his words. Therefore they went their way.
I don't know what that means when it says that the queen spoke many words that could not be understood. Maybe they were gospel things that the people didn't understand. Or is it possible that she was speaking in tongues?
Speaking in tongues, sure.
And I also think it's neat that Abish reached out for her. It makes me wonder if maybe she was specifically the queen's servant.
Well, it does describe her as her mistress.
Yeah.
So yeah, there does seem to be a relationship there.
So that's cool. And that I love this couple so much. And that they get to be a missionary couple together is amazing. Just amazing.
And consider this, even if you take the gospel out of context, these people were evidently remarkable rulers anyway. Yeah. What is her first thought? Have mercy on this people, my people.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
I'm concerned about them. And the king, hey, stop arguing, you people. Here's what here's something that we have to talk about and that you will benefit from, and I want to share with you.
Well, and here's something interesting. Lamoni would probably be the teacher because Lamoni's wife wasn't there when Ammon laid out the whole gospel plan. In her vision, she definitely got something that she recognizes the centrality of Christ, which Lamoni testified to her before they passed out. But she testifies for what she knows, and Lamoni is teaching this, and now they're his words. They're not even Ammon's words anymore. He has the confirmation from the Lord. They're now his words. I just love this.
Well, and here's something else to ponder. We often depict the Lamanites as these one-dimensional savages. But consider verse 32, that there were people who would not hear the words of the gospel. What did they do? Did they argue? Did they cause a riot? They just left.
Yeah.
They just went their way. What an odd concept. If someone is talking about something that you don't agree with, maybe just go on your way. Something to think about.
Yes.
So the next few verses, many Lamanites are converted, and Ammon establishes a church among them. In verse 36, this is how the chapter closes out. And thus the work of the Lord did commence among the Lamanites. Thus the Lord did begin to pour out his Spirit upon them, and we see that his arm is extended to all people who will repent and believe on his name. That gets back to the concept that we were just talking about is, you see that the Great Spirit favors the Nephites. He can favor you too.
Yeah.
And here's how that can happen. So we go on to chapter 20.
Now, since we're going to do the time codes, I would just like to welcome everybody to chapter 20. If you've clicked on the time code and it's brought you right here, hey, welcome. It's nice to have you here at chapter 20.
Verse 1, and it came to pass that when they had established a church in that land, that King Lamoni desired that Ammon should go with him to the land of Nephi, that he might show him unto his father. I'm sure that'll go well.
What's interesting is how much Ammon, has he met his father? You know, how does he think this is going to go?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But in the next few verses, it talks about that Ammon learns from the Spirit that Aaron, Mulukai, and Alma are in prison in Middoni. And King Lamoni mentions that, hey, in Middoni, the king there is named Antiono. And Lamoni is a friend of his. And so Lamoni offers to go with him to help.
It's so cool because when you read those verses, they just seem like friends. You
They
know,
do.
Lamoni and Ammon, they're good buddies now.
Yep. Verse 8, and it came to pass that as Ammon and Lamoni were journeying thither, they met the father of Lamoni, who was king over all the land.
Interesting.
And behold, the father of Lamoni said unto him, Why did ye not come to the feast on that great day when I made a feast unto my sons and unto my people? A quick aside here. Do you remember that when Ammon was going to prepare the horses and chariots, that's what the king was supposed to go to, was this great feast day.
Yeah.
And he unfortunately had
He had a missionary opportunity.
Right. And so there you go.
And actually, coming up, his dad is going to have a missionary opportunity with Ammon as well. Let's listen.
Yes, but in a very different flavor. Verse 10, and he also said, Whither art thou going with this Nephite, who is one of the children of a liar? And it came to pass that Lamoni rehearsed unto him whither he was going, for he feared to offend him. And he also told him all the cause of his tarrying in his own kingdom, that he did not go unto his father to the feast which he had prepared. Okay, well, so he explains his situation. Verse 13, and now when Lamoni had rehearsed unto him all these things, behold, to his astonishment, his father was angry with him, and said, Lamoni, thou art going to deliver these Nephites, who are sons of a liar. Behold, he robbed our fathers, and now his children are also come amongst us, that they may by their cunning and their lyings deceive us, that they again may rob us of our property. Now the father of Lamoni commanded him that he should slay Ammon with the sword. And he also commanded him that he should not go to the land of Middoni, but that he should return with him to the land of Ishmael. But Lamoni said unto him, I will not slay Ammon, neither will I return to the land of Ishmael, but I go to the land of Middoni, that I may release the brethren of Ammon. For I know that they are just men, and holy prophets of the true God.
What a great testimony. But how come he doesn't fear to offend him now? I mean, before he feared to offend him. And isn't it interesting that he is astonished that his dad is so angry about this?
Well, think about it. He's just had a wonderful experience, and it's similar to Abish. Abish sees this spiritual outpouring and thinks, well, everybody will just come and will feel the Spirit and it'll be wonderful. Only they don't.
Yeah.
They get together and argue.
Yeah.
You know?
He doesn't realize his dad is not ready yet.
Right.
So we should help him get ready.
Yep. Let's go on. Verse 16. Now when his father had heard these words, he was angry with him. This is angry with Lamoni. And he drew his sword that he might smite him to the earth. But Ammon stood forth and said unto him, Behold, thou shalt not slay thy son. Nevertheless, it were better that he should fall than thee. For behold, he has repented of his sins. But if thou shouldest fall at this time, in thine anger, thy soul could not be saved. And again it is expedient that thou shouldst forbear, for if thou shouldst slay thy son, he being an innocent man, his blood would cry from the ground to the Lord his God, for vengeance to come upon thee, and perhaps thou wouldst lose thy soul. So it's interesting that Ammon is concerned really more about the king's soul.
Isn't that interesting?
Than about Lamoni dying.
Yeah.
Now when Ammon had said these words unto him, he answered him, saying, I know that if I should slay my son, that I should shed innocent blood, for it is thou that hast sought to destroy him. And he stretched forth his hand to slay Ammon. But Ammon withstood his blows, and also smote his arm, that he could not use it.
See, this has got to be some kind of a move that Ammon was taught at some point. Because
somehow he knows to go for the arm.
Go for the arm. And everybody, it seems to work all the time.
Yep. This time it doesn't appear to have been smitten off, just hurt in such a way that he could not use it. Now when the king saw that Ammon could slay him, he began to plead with Ammon, that he would spare his life. But Ammon raised his sword and said unto him, Behold, I will smite thee, except thou wilt grant unto me that my brethren may be cast out of prison. Now the king, fearing he should lose his life, said, If thou wilt spare me, I will grant unto thee whatsoever thou wilt ask, even to half the kingdom. Now when Ammon saw that he had wrought upon the old king according to his desire, he said unto him, If thou wilt grant that my brethren may be cast out of prison, and also that Lamoni may retain his kingdom, and that ye be not displeased with him, but grant that he may do according to his own desires in whatsoever thing he thinketh, then will I spare thee, otherwise I will smite thee to the earth. Now when Ammon had said these words, the king began to rejoice because of his life. And when he saw that Ammon had no desire to destroy him, and when he also saw the great love he had for his son Lamoni, he was astonished exceedingly, and said, Because this is all that thou hast desired, that I would release thy brethren, and suffer that my son Lamoni should retain his kingdom? Behold, I will grant unto you that my son may retain his kingdom from this time and forever, and I will govern him no more.
This is a really important thing that happens here. This notion of Lamoni no longer being under the king of all the Lamanites, but in essence having his own kingdom independent of that. Because in a few years, this very king, and I don't know where he's going in his development, but he pulls together an innumerable army to eventually join with Amlicites to destroy the Nephites. Troops would have been pulled out of all the other region kingdoms, but not Lamoni. If they didn't establish this, Lamoni would have had to have given him troops to go and destroy the very people that they now love and affiliate with.
Yeah, let's remember when Alma, the chief priest, and evidently head of the army, is grappling with Amlicites and the army of the Lamanites that Amlicites joins with. When Alma is fighting face to face with the king of the Lamanites, that's this guy.
Yeah. Who obviously has his arm, his wound is recovered at that point, but Alma gives him this is his first missionary opportunity. Alma gives him another missionary opportunity to make him rethink his life a little bit. Yep. And so that by the time Aaron comes knocking on his door, he's really ready.
Absolutely. Verse 27, he continues, And I will also grant unto thee that thy brethren may be cast out of prison, and thou and thy brethren may come unto me in my kingdom, for I shall greatly desire to see thee. For the king was greatly astonished at the words which he had spoken, and also at the words which had been spoken by his son Lamoni. Therefore he was desirous to learn them. So Ammon and Lamoni proceed to Middoni. Lamoni is favored by Antiomno, and Aaron and his brethren are released from prison. They were hungry, thirsty, naked, and bound with strong cords for many days. So now we get into chapter 21. So here's our time marker. Welcome to chapter 21.
It's good to have you here.
Right before chapter 21, we get another little summary. It says, An account of the preaching of Aaron and Mulukai and their brethren to the Lamanites. Here again, this is from the plates. It's not something that was added. Chapter 21, Aaron journeys to Jerusalem. So now again, we're flashbacking within a flashback. So at this point, Ammon has blessed everyone. Everyone has gone their separate ways. Ammon went to Ishmael. Aaron went to Jerusalem. This is a city that was built by the Lamanites and the Amulonites and the Amalekites.
It's interesting because it's mentioned as if we know who they are already.
Yeah, now they could be mentioned in the lost 116 pages, but I don't know.
Yeah, so for those of you who've ever, and maybe nobody has thought about this or cares, but there's a few of us out there who have always wondered what in the world is going on with the Amalekites. It's interesting to note that they appear after the Amlicites have been talked about, and the Amlicites disappear. And so Royal Skousen, who's done the most work on the analysis of textual variants, explains that the Amalekites came about due to a spelling variant in the 1830 edition. They were evidently the same people as the Amalicites. Now, the Amlicites, if you'll recall, are Alma chapter 2, led by Amlici, went to war, joined the Lamanites, and it appears that that's who the Amalekites are. So if in your mind you want to insert Amlicites, that might be a good place to make a connection.
If you want to read more about this type of theory, it would be good for you to go to Book of Mormon Central for KnoWhy number 109. It's good discussion.
And a reminder, the video will just summarize it, but if you go to the page, which we'll link, that goes into more detail and will give you references that you can read up if you want to learn more about it.
So regardless of who the Amalekites were, we definitely know who the Amulonites were. These are the descendants of the priests of Noah, who had been living among the Lamanites at this time.
Seem to be doing pretty well for themselves.
Yeah, evidently. Verse 3, the Lamanites are hardened, but the Amalekites, or Amlicites, and the Amulonites were harder still, and they were feeding the hardening of the Lamanites. And it came to pass that Aaron came to the city of Jerusalem, and first began to preach to the Amalekites. And he began to preach to them in their synagogues, for they had built synagogues after the order of the Nehors. For many of the Amalekites and the Amulonites were after the order of the Nehors.
See, now that's good missionary work.
Yeah, because the Amulonites certainly would not have been among the Nephites during Nehor's preaching.
Yeah.
So,
but if we're right that the Amalekites are the Amlicites, they would have brought Nehor's teachings down, and, the Amulonites are like, hey, this is great.
Yeah, we'll buy into this.
Yeah.
Therefore, as Aaron entered into one of their synagogues to preach unto the people, and as he was speaking unto them, behold, there arose an Amalekite and began to contend with him, saying, What is this that thou hast testified? Hast thou seen an angel? Why do not angels appear unto us? Behold, are not this people as good as thy people? Thou also sayest, Except we repent, we shall perish. How knowest thou the thought and intent of our hearts? How knowest thou that we have cause to repent? How knowest thou that we are not a righteous people? Behold, we have built sanctuaries, and we do assemble ourselves together to worship God. We do believe that God will save all men.
Believest thou that the Son of God shall come to redeem mankind from their sins?
We do not believe that thou knowest any such thing. We do not believe in these foolish traditions. We do not believe that thou knowest of things to come, neither do we believe that thy fathers and also that our fathers did know concerning the things which they spake of that which is to come. And now Aaron began to open the scriptures unto them concerning the coming of Christ, and also concerning the resurrection of the dead, and that there could be no redemption for mankind, save it were through the death and sufferings of Christ, and the atonement of his blood. And it came to pass, as he began to expound these things unto them, they were angry with him, and began to mock him, and they would not hear the words which he spake. So they didn't hear his words, and they decided to leave. They departed out of the synagogue, and he came over to a village which was called Anianti, and there he found Mulukai preaching the word unto them, and also Alma and his brethren. And they contended with many about the word. And they also left and departed into the land of Middoni, where again, few people believed on the words which they taught.
Now, this has got to be really hard. And one thing you'd want to ask is, why didn't he do what Ammon did? You know, the Lord said that they were supposed to be an example of him. And so Ammon did it. He was an example. And it was so effective that he waited until the king basically pled with him, please, please, please teach me the gospel. But here Aaron went in and he just started preaching the gospel, and it went terribly. But he has a different mission than Ammon did. Remember that the example was that they were supposed to show forth how they would handle affliction. And Ammon had a mission among a particular group. Aaron, he started out with those who were dissenters from the church, who were even more hardened than the Lamanites. These people already knew the gospel. It wasn't about starting from scratch. So Ammon served the way he should have served, and Aaron and his brethren, I would propose, served the way they should have. The people they were talking to knew better. Now, as for the fact that few believed their words, just wait. By the time we get to Alma 25, that's going to change. So give it time, Aaron and his brethren. So then they get to Middoni and they get cast in prison, and others of their brethren escape. And so this is the condition that they find themselves in, suffering when they're rescued by Ammon.
And Lamoni.
And Lamoni, right.
In verse 15, and they went forth again to declare the word, and thus they were delivered for the first time out of prison, which is kind of ominous if you think about it. And thus they had suffered. And they went forth whithersoever they were led by the Spirit of the Lord, preaching the word of God in every synagogue of the Amalekites, or in every assembly of the Lamanites, where they could be admitted. And it came to pass that the Lord began to bless them, insomuch that they brought many to the knowledge of the truth. Yea, they did convince many of their sins, and of the traditions of their fathers, which were not correct. First of all, I want you to consider being put up in prison for several days, being deprived of food, being deprived of your clothes, and being strung up with strong bonds. What's job one when you get released? Okay, back to work. That's just very impressive.
They know why they're there.
From the Institute Manual, I have a quote from President Henry B. Eyring about the importance of why we must keep trying to reach every soul. Quote, "Why should I speak to anyone about the gospel who seems content? What danger is there to them or to me if I do or say nothing? Well, the danger may be hard to see, but it is real, both for them and for us. For instance, at some moment in the world to come, everyone you will ever meet will know what you know now. They will know that the only way to live forever in association with our families and in the presence of our Heavenly Father and His Son, Jesus Christ, was to choose to enter into the gate by baptism at the hands of those with authority from God. They will know that the only way families can be together forever is to accept and to keep sacred covenants offered in the temples of God on this earth. And they will know that you knew, and they will remember whether you offered them what someone had offered you." End quote. Powerful thought.
Mm-hmm.
So Ammon and Lamoni return to the land of Ishmael. Lamoni refuses Ammon to be his servant. He's fired then? I don't know. Lamoni causes synagogues to be built. Lamoni teaches his people and tells them that they are now a free people. And Ammon teaches the people they were zealous for keeping the commandments of God.
What
great
a beautiful
victory story
statement
there in Ishmael.
Yeah,
so great.
That's awesome. Awesome.
And now we go on to chapter 22.
All right.
And here we have Aaron's story, right?
Mm-hmm.
Verse 1, "Now as Ammon was thus teaching the people of Lamoni continually, we will return to the account of Aaron and his brethren. For after he departed from the land of Middoni, he was led by the Spirit to the land of Nephi, even to the house of the king, which was over all the land, save it were the land of Ishmael. And he was the father of Lamoni. And it came to pass that he went in unto him into the king's palace with his brethren, and bowed himself before the king, and said unto him,
Behold, O king, we are the brethren of Ammon, whom thou hast delivered out of prison. And now, O king, if thou wilt spare our lives, we will be thy servants.
Arise, for I will grant unto you your lives, and I will not suffer that ye shall be my servants, but I will insist that ye shall administer unto me. For I have been somewhat troubled in mind because of the generosity and the greatness of the words of thy brother Ammon. And I desire to know the cause why he has not come up out of Middoni with thee.
Behold, the Spirit of the Lord has called him another way. He has gone to the land of Ishmael to teach the people of Lamoni.
What is this that ye have said concerning the Spirit of the Lord? Behold, this is the thing which doth trouble me. And also, what is this that Ammon said? If ye will repent, ye shall be saved, and if ye will not repent, ye shall be cast off at the last day.
Believest thou that there is a God?
I know that the Amalekites say that there is a God, and I have granted unto them that they should build sanctuaries, that they may assemble themselves together to worship him. And if now thou sayest there is a God, behold, I will believe.
Behold, assuredly as thou livest, O king, there is a God.
Is God that great Spirit that brought our fathers out of the land of Jerusalem?
Yea, he is that great Spirit, and he created all things both in heaven and in earth. Believest thou this?
Yea, I believe that the great Spirit created all things, and I desire that ye should tell me concerning all these things, and I will believe thy words. And so Aaron starts again at the creation of the world and the fall of Adam and Eve, and teaches the plan of redemption and the importance of the coming of Christ. And most importantly, he uses the Scriptures. Now think of the Scriptures that they would have at this point. Remember, this is just the Old Testament, essentially. Parts of it anyway, and perhaps parts that we don't have today, and maybe some writings of the Nephites? Don't know. But that's what he's got to teach with, and he uses them to teach. And it came to pass that after Aaron had expounded these things unto him, the king said, What shall I do, that I may have this eternal life of which thou hast spoken? Yea, what shall I do, that I may be born of God, having this wicked spirit rooted out of my breast, and receive his Spirit, that I may be filled with joy, that I may not be cast off at the last day? Behold, I will give up all that I possess. Yea, I will forsake my kingdom, that I may receive this great joy.
As a side note, that's the very thing that Aaron did. Remember that the people wanted Aaron to be king. He forsook the kingdom in order to be born again. And the king has this same desire.
And as it was pointed out in a recent general conference, we have the first offer when the king was threatened with his life, when Ammon disabled his arm. I will give up half the kingdom if you spare my life. But here, he's willing to give up everything.
Yeah, well, not yet. That's coming up. He's willing to put all of his kingdom on the altar, but it gets even better. Let's continue. Aaron said unto him, If thou desirest this thing, if thou wilt bow down before God, yea, if thou wilt repent of all thy sins, and wilt bow down before God and call on his name in faith, believing that ye shall receive, then shalt thou receive the hope which thou desirest.
And it came to pass that when Aaron had said these words, the king did bow down before the Lord upon his knees, yea, even he did prostrate himself upon the earth, and cried mightily, saying, O God, Aaron hath told me that there is a God, and if there is a God, and if thou art God, wilt thou make thyself known unto me? And I will give away all my sins to know thee, and that I may be raised from the dead, and be saved at the last day." And now when the king had said these words, he was struck as if he was dead.
This is an amazing miracle. But notice the growth. As John pointed out, we started with being willing to give up half his kingdom for his life. Now he's willing to give up all his possessions, including his whole kingdom, to be born of God, and now is the greatest sacrifice that he's willing to put on the altar. I will give away all my sins in order to know God. That to me is one of the most powerful pieces of humility. I can't wait till I'm at that point. I'm not at that point.
We talked about in
so
previous
inspiring.
episodes about how each one of us has sins that we kind of hang on to.
Yep. Favorite
That are
sins.
a little difficult to let go. The king of the Lamanites, he's willing to let go. All of them.
Yep. Yep. And Aaron, I think Aaron was the perfect person to teach him because he can really relate to this idea of giving away all of what the world could offer, which is a lot, in order to know God and be born again. So these guys
Absolutely.
are kindred spirits, I think.
Well, and from the Old Gospel Doctrine Manual, there's a quote from President Ezra Taft Benson from October 1983 General Conference. He says, quote, "Each of us must surrender our sins if we are to really know Christ. For we do not know him until we become like him. There are some, like this king, who must pray until they too have a wicked spirit rooted from them so they can find the same joy." End quote. It's a great image, rooted. For anyone who has dug up weeds, does that give you a sense of what is being talked about, this wicked spirit being rooted from someone?
That's awesome. That's a great image.
There's another quote that I found in the Institute manual from Elder Alexander B. Morrison of the 70 at the time. This is from General Conference, October 1999. He says, quote, "To take his name upon us means a willingness to do whatever he requires of us. Someone has said that the price of a Christian life is the same today as always. It is simply to give all that we have, holding back nothing, to give away all our sins to know him. When we fall short of that standard by reason of sloth, indifference, or wickedness, when we are evil or envious, selfish, sensual, or shallow, we, in a sense at least, crucify him afresh. And when we try consistently to be our very best, when we care for and serve others, when we overcome selfishness with love, when we place the welfare of others above our own, when we bear each other's burdens and mourn with those that mourn, when we comfort those that stand in need of comfort and stand as witnesses of God at all times and in all things and in all places, then we honor him and draw from his power and become more and more like him, growing brighter and brighter if we persist until the perfect day." End quote.
Wonderful.
So going on, starting in verse 19, the servants of the king ran and told the queen, and she came and saw the king lying as if he was dead. And it looks like Aaron and his brethren did it. So she commands the servants to kill Aaron and his brethren. And they respond, "Why commandest thou that we should slay these men, when behold, one of them is mightier than us all? Therefore we shall fall before them." And so what's her answer? "Okay, well, we need a bigger army."
See, now that's very different than Lamoni's wife.
Yes.
This isn't working out like that at all.
No, it isn't. Verse 22, "Now when Aaron saw the determination of the queen, he also, knowing the hardness of the hearts of the people, feared lest that a multitude should assemble themselves together, and there should be a great contention and a disturbance among them. Therefore he put forth his hand, and raised the king from the earth, and said unto him, Stand. And he stood upon his feet, receiving his strength. Now this was done in the presence of the queen and many of the servants. And when they saw it, they greatly marveled, and began to fear. And the king stood forth and began to minister unto them. And he did minister unto them, insomuch that his whole household were converted unto the Lord.
I love it.
Yeah. So then on to 24. Now there was a multitude gathered together because of the commandment of the queen, right? She was raising an army. Mm-hmm. And there began to be great murmurings among them because of Aaron and his brethren. But the king stood forth among them and administered unto them, and they were pacified towards Aaron and those who were with him. And it came to pass that when the king saw that the people were pacified, he caused that Aaron and his brethren should stand forth in the midst of the multitude, and that they should preach the word unto them. And it came to pass that the king sent a proclamation throughout all the land, amongst all his people who were in all his land, who were in all the regions round about, which was bordering even to the sea on the east and on the west, and which was divided from the land of Zarahemla by a narrow strip of wilderness, which ran from the sea east even to the sea west, and round about on the borders of the seashore, and the borders of the wilderness, which was on the north by the land of Zarahemla, through the borders of Bantai.
This seems like a very strange detour.
It is. And for the rest of the chapter, verses 28 through 34, Mormon decides to take an opportunity to describe Nephite and Lamanite geography. And it's actually one of the great blessings that we have in understanding the land that they're dealing with.
Well, and it's clear that it's important to him for us to understand that. And this is a similar aside to when he took a break to tell us about the monetary system. This is just, every now and then Mormon will look at this and say, okay, well, we really need to, we haven't explained it at this point, we should really explain it. I have a thought about this difference between ministering and administering. And maybe I shouldn't pay that much attention to it, but I do notice that when the king ministered to his family in verse 23, the entire household was converted. But in 25, he stood forth to the crowd and administered to them, and they were pacified. And then he let Ammon and his brethren stand forth and do the preaching. So I'm not sure what the difference between ministering and administering is necessarily, but the results definitely seem to be different in the way that they're described here. With regards to the geography, we've mentioned this before, we'll mention it again. The map that we use is the Seminary map from the church materials. And if you want a video on the scriptural basis for the outline of this map, and it's a great walk through the Book of Mormon, you can take a look at the video here.
Yep. And to be clear, as there seems to be continual complaints, we are not ascribing to any Mesoamerican theory or Heartland theory or South American theory or any theory. This is a map without geographical statements. This is just a relative map. It's internal to itself.
We're subscribing to the Book of Mormon geographical model.
That's right. Well, I realize that this has been a very long episode, but
I think it's going to win.
It just covers so many. It covers two of the greatest missionary stories, perhaps, in all of Scripture.
Yeah,
they're wonderful.
Amazing. Amazing. And I love them.
I know it's been a long reading assignment this week, but we hope you've been able to read. If not, keep trying.
Yeah,
this is a really great portion of the Book of Mormon, and there is so much to be learned and so many great examples. We look forward to talking to you in our next lesson, and we'll see you then.
Look forward to it.
This podcast is not officially affiliated with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints,
but we're really big fans.